I had Mark spread it out to 8. Doing like 12. So then you can tell.
Hi, I'm feeling.
It's like, last October, this October, this October is not fully done yet. So then when they go to the next one, they're like, okay, now I'll take it, I'm doing 13. So I have to spread it out.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll look forward if you have any questions and all that. It's kind of a meta kind of stuff. Thank you. Okay, I love it. I've stopped having parents. So I've got like a 5-minute intro. Oh yeah. So yeah, I'll probably wait just for a few minutes shy or something an hour so I'll get this thing and make sure it's working.
I saw her at
Oh, yeah?
I'm waiting to do the first question. So your thoughts on Baker beef?
Yeah, that's fun.
Learning about it
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I think it's time to go ahead and get started. I just want to say thank you all for being here this afternoon for our annual Kendall McNabney lectureship. It's always a great time, and enjoyed having dinner with residents and faculty last night, so that was a special occasion. And so it's wonderful to be here. You know, I always like to kind of go through some of the history and discuss Dr. McNabney before introducing our guest speaker of the day. So obviously this campus has changed quite a bit over time. This is a relatively recent photo of where we are. You know, we've certainly grown and evolved. Nice new, you know, trauma bays that were put in, but you know, we obviously, there's some history here too, and this is the old General Hospital, and these quotes from a Star article are always entertaining to look back on. You know, we were quoted as not being the classiest act in town, but the emergency room was a tough act to follow, so I guess that's a compliment for us. You know, and it said General Hospital had few conveniences, but its emergency room boasts at least 2 doctors on duty at any time. So fortunately, the physical plant is a little better nowadays. And so here's Dr. McNabney in the old trauma bays here. And you know, so for residents, you may not know what that big box is, but that's the biocom. So you can, computers have gotten a little smaller in the meantime here. And so Dr. McNabney was the first chair of our department, and we founded our residency program in 1973. So that puts us somewhere number 3, 4, 5 in the country. It's a little hazy, but somewhere in that realm of residency programs. Then he was a president of the University Association of EMS, which was kind of the predecessor for what is now SAEM. And then he served on the board of directors from 1982 to 86. And so, you know, we really owe a lot to him for not only what he did for our program, but for emergency medicine as a whole. You know, he was one of the pioneers that you know, came back, you know, from Vietnam, saw that there was a need for having specialists that are trained in providing emergency care, and kind of was on the forefront of establishing that kind of training and expertise in our country. And so, you know, a sign of a good leader is not how many followers you have, but how many leaders you create. And I think that this program and the people that are here and the people that we've trained, you know, it really is a testament to what Dr. McNabney established and kind of his leadership. And so we're grateful for that and his legacy. And then I just kind of like to flip through. You know, we've trained a lot of people over the years. I'm always, I don't know where the class that's, you know, looks like Mount Fuji or something where they did their class photo, but somehow that's what we have. So a lot of people in this room and online are in these photos. And then we get to last year's class that graduated. So, and then Dr. McNabney certainly worked hard, but he liked to play hard too. And here's a picture with his late wife Elaine as well. And so that takes me to the introduction for our guest speaker, Dr. Felix Ankel. So Dr. Ankel got his bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee in 1985, followed by his medical doctorate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which I'm kind of partial to since my daughter goes there. So, and then completed his residency in emergency medicine at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Following that, he went back to Madison, where he joined the faculty and was an assistant professor until 1995, and then moved to the University of Minnesota, where he attained full professorship in 2015. And then, as you have heard about this morning, Dr. Ankles wore a lot of different hats. He was PD at Regions Hospital for 13 years, so that's quite a span to run. And then he wore a few different other academic hats as well. He was the assistant head of the department for several years, as well as the associate head of academic affairs for looks like 12 years, the DIO for 5 years, and then has been vice president of health profession education as well as associate dean at Health Partners, and then has also been the medical director of education for the Health Professional Institute. He's also done quite a bit of service for our specialty. He's served on the SAM Board of Directors as well as the CORD Board of Directors, and has been on the ABIM Board of Directors since 2018 and is the current president-elect. His research is focused primarily in medical education. He has over 100 publications, abstracts, book chapters, 90 plus international and national speaking presentations. He currently serves as an editor of academic emergency medicine, as well as an editor and contributor of IceNet.blog, which is a medical education blog that I wasn't familiar with, but I logged on, looked at it. It had some fascinating things. And then lastly, I thought I would just highlight a few honors that he has had. He's been acknowledged with these, including the International Medical Educator of the Year by the Royal College of Canada, as well as the Arnold P. Gold Humanism Society, ACGME Parker J. Palmer Courage to Teach Award, the SAM Best Innovation in Emergency Medicine Education Award, and the CORD Faculty Teaching Award. So he has done quite a bit, and it's a true honor to have you here to be able to give the McNabney Lectureship this year. So without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Ankle.
Well, thank you. I mean, my mom would be proud. And thank you for coming. This talk is going to be a meta talk. It's not, do you do a CT before an LP? And so I will just ask for some forgiveness on that. But it's something, when I'm asked certain questions about the futures, things I ponder about. And my hope is I can share a few thoughts about where maybe the future is heading. I'm a wanderer, so I'll just say that up front. And again, lived experiences probably influences what sort of thought processes, especially on meta talks. One of them is I worked for 30 years on the largest consumer-governed healthcare organization in the United States. And what that means is we have a bunch of hospitals in Wisconsin and Minnesota, medical staff about 2,000, ton of clinics. But we also have a health plan, about 1.4 million people, and they are actually the ones that vote who's on the board that kind of set directions for our health system. So it was a palpable difference when I came from the University of Wisconsin to Health Partners at Regions Hospital. The other thing which has been interesting, it's been run by women for decades. The whole C-suite, they call it the she-suite. But the CEO of the hospital, the CFO, this and that, and so it is especially when we want to talk about the future. I think how we practice medical care is slightly different than my peers I talk about in the country, and how we educate is slightly different. And I think it's still a patriarchy, but it's run by women. And also the last eight years, I've been on the board, and we've really looked at how we lean in towards the future. So I'll bring it back to some of the things we're doing on the board. Again, thank you. If you want to go down rabbit holes, I would go there. There's references to everything I talk, another pontification on that. But I probably want to start and leave you with this picture. And this is my hope is a little interactive part of that. What are top of mind things when you see this picture?
The skull and crossbones.
Okay, well, okay, so symbolism, what is that?
Symbolizing pirates.
All right, so pirates are interesting. If you really look towards pirates, you know, they were way ahead in terms of equity, in terms of profit sharing, things like that. So a pirate. Anybody else? What's the big thing in the picture? Hmm?
Like sunset.
Okay, sunset, very nice. And what is in the sunset? The boat. So I would tell you to leave here is to going from being the boat to be the pirate. Okay? That ultimately we're trained to be vessels of knowledge, but we're entering a world that we are going to be navigators of wisdom. And I'll deconstruct that a little bit. The other thing, I think I was asked to give a core talk on the future of medical education. And I had no idea. So I looked up future. And then I found that there is actually a professional organization of professional futurists. Who knew? At first I was, is this a thing? But it is for people that are NGOs, people. There are core competencies, there's skill set. So this is legit. Did not know that. But if I really looked at it, their core competencies a little bit like either strategic or scenario planning. The one core competencies that is interesting is this whole concept of futuring. And what futuring is to look at soft trends and hard trends. So hard trends are things that are happening. Climate change, at least in Minnesota. Soft trends are things that may happen. Is gas going to be $4 in 5 months or something like that? And the key skills of these professional futurists is really to identify the hard trends and then look at soft trends and kind of predict which ones will be hard trends. So the bones of this talk is to look at 3, I think, hard trends, which are really our relationship with knowledge is going to change. Our relationship to professional identity is going to change, and our relationship to structure is going to change. Talk a little bit about how things in our environment are already there, if you look, and then talk about 2 things to consider doing, 2 crafts or skill sets to do that. One's what we call fusion skills, and the other one's systems thinking. So, you saw in the bio right in the 80s, I graduated, and that is where really there's been an inflection point where the level of knowledge went from a linear increase to an exponential increase. But we actually still have a lot of linear processes to deal with the exponential increase in knowledge. And that has and will come crashing. So who's the person on the left? I see smiles in the back.
Brent Spiner.
Great. And what role does he play? Data. Okay. And so since I have you here, thing in the middle, what is that?
DNA.
All right. Is that data?
Yes, absolutely.
Is that information? Is that knowledge?
I don't know about that.
Okay. And is it wisdom? So something just to think about. Who's heard about the Lisp machine? So nobody, because now there's a Lisp machine museum. And so in the 80s, there was a AI spring, but really didn't turn to summer or fall, went right to winter. A lot of capital went into AI. You know, right when the flip went from linear to exponential, money to government, military, math, and everything. But it flamed out. And there's a couple brothers, the Dreyfus brothers, and for the CBME sort of thing, is they predicted that. And Hubert and Stewart, California. One was an industrial engineer, and one was a philosopher. And they essentially said, there are things that are uniquely humans that computers can't do. Period. And part of it is not the analytic thinking, but the synthetic thinking and all that. So that was 1980s. What's interesting is 10 or 15 years later, the Dreyfus brothers wrote an article with David Leach, head of ACGME, and other people from ACGME, and Paul Batalden, who's a Minnesotan that's into the sort of quality realm. And so that's where competency-based, core competencies and all that. You have these people that said computers are not going to be able to do it. There's something uniquely human, and there's some competence. And even the last couple of years, I mean, get these articles in terms of human intuition for sepsis or the Yale observation scores. The Gestalt is better than any either early clinical decision aid or things like that. So that is then. That is still where we're at today. But I would posit, and I will talk a little bit more, it used to be that physicians, the value statement of physician is in between this information and knowledge space. Patients would come in, give you some information, something magic would happen, knowledge would be imparted, and value would be created. I actually think the data, information, and knowledge space is going to be automated as much, and really the value proposition of the physician is going to be from the knowledge to the wisdom space. That's a shared space. It's a shared space with patients, families, the community. And those skill sets to be in that space are different than being the vessel of knowledge. And we'll talk a little bit more how that is happening. All right. So who is the seagull that's looking the other way in this room amongst your peers? So for many years, or for me, the professional identity was a very binary. I was either a physician or not a physician. I was it was very interesting when I went into administration, you're either a suit or not a suit. You're a physician, not a suit. It's a very binary way of looking at a professional identity. And I think things are changing. Who's this person? Yeah, Carrie Perry, Perry's boyfriend? Okay. So if you do Justin Trudeau and quantum computing, in 2 minutes, he talks about quantum computing that is super accessible, and it's interesting. It's, there's some debate whether it's a setup. So really what is, they're opening a quantum computing place, and has anybody seen this video? He's in front of this huge chalkboard, and a reporter asked him, because there's some perceptions if he's, pleasant to the eye and the ear, he wouldn't be able to explain quantum computing. But in a minute and 14 minutes, really talks about, in a binary world, you're either A or B, A or B, A or B. In a quantum, you're infinity. And I think I would say from a professional identity point of view, if you're more than just this vessel of knowledge, and you are open to have your professional identity be quantum, you'll thrive. And so this is some medical education a few years ago for the medical probably read it. When I was a residency director, when I started, I felt like I was the residency director. The residents were my residents. Anybody, I would be the advocate for those residents. All I needed to do was know everything about emergency medicine, know everything about medical education, be the hardest working person, and I'm good. That's not going to work anymore. Ultimately, you need to almost be like a learning architect. You need to learn how to assess. And these are roles that are non-binary roles. They're not specific to a professional identity, at least a medical profession. And ultimately, it is the nomads. So these are knowledge people that go through different, there's actually a nomad society that you can look at. But if, you know, I have mixed feelings about generational comparisons. But if you look at people that thrive in flat networks, that like to fail fast, are continuously learning, collaborating and all that, those are the nomads, and those are the, and ultimately I think the emergency physicians of the futures are going to be more the nomads than the experts. Or their expertise is in seeing the system, or the expertise is being able to connect with others with fusion skills. So here's a colleague who's a nomad. I think it's kind of sunset this with COVID. Does anybody know what positive deviance is as a craft or a skill or a scientific thing? Has to do with peanut butter. But positive deviance is actually looking at patterns and not looking at the outliers of the errors. It's actually who are really people functioning well. So if you're looking at central line infections, you're not looking at the people that have infections. What is it about people that never have infections? And seeing what the commonalities are. And so there's some people that were studying back in the day, malnutrition in kids in Vietnam. And inevitably, in a few villages, there were kids that were not malnourished. And what these researchers did, they actually asked those parents what they were doing. And apparently, at that time, peanuts and peanut butter was not something you'd give a kid to eat, but they would not be malnourished. And so what Brad Gordon did is there are some emergency physicians, when they're on shift, everything's chilled, everyone gets off on time, getting their charts, and so he went around talking to our faculty that had that and our alumni across it. We just do a podcast conversation of what is it about those individuals that everything seems to fit in place, you know, because by definition, the chaos and the number of patients coming in and all that all averages out. But when these people are in there, it's almost like hot spotting some of that. And so that is something that'll be interesting if we're moving more towards a system. We're analytic thinkers. Our whole medical schools are based. My parents both worked medical. It was about analysis, right? You have a problem, figure everything out and everything. But if it's not problem-based, it's actually what is on the flip side of that. There's probably some untapped learning. So the first hard trend is I think our relationship with knowledge is going to change. Second one is our relationship with professional identity is going to change, I postulate. The third one is our relationship with structure is going to change. So this was the earliest org chart I could find, December 1917, and it's a couple things that are interesting. Number one, there it's all Alfred, George, Charles, Oscar, Samuel. The other thing is it's interesting how you have everything sort of in different departments and sections. And I would tell you, at least in our system, even though we're sort of consumer governed and all that, it is very much of departments, sections, very much, you know, a VP, director, manager, and all that. Which I think if you're making tabulating machines is probably helpful because you want to have all the widgets be the same and everything being the same. I would tell you in a knowledge economy, actually just focusing on everything being the same is probably not as helpful. And this article in Harvard Business Review is from 1993, but it's still interesting, and they really looked at how knowledge work gets done, and it's not done in hierarchies. It's really done in networks. And the three networks that are most important is the trust network. Who do you call when you're in crisis? The communication network on the right. Who do you call when you want to know what's going on? And then the personal learning network. Who do you call that you want to actually learn something? So I started looking a little bit into the personal learning networks, and in some of these spaces in emergency medicine you probably recognize. And so I actually was deliberate in terms of reaching out to people for a personal learning network. How many of you have developed your personal learning network? There you go. You want to share how you do that?
As a panel of mentors or individuals who have certain strengths that you want to leverage off of. For example, I had one who was more of a philosopher, another one who's either a clinician or a radiologist, another one who understands how boards work and financial structures work. And so tapping into them allows you to leverage the wisdom of the crowd.
Which is, if you haven't done that or thought about doing it, it's a game changer. And then the only reason I figured it out is when I had that senior VP position, what they do, I don't know if they do it for deans, but then they have you do the meet and greets with everyone. And I'm like, okay, and so you meet with the head of HR, and you meet with the head of finance, and you meet the head of comms, but it was interesting. So one of the things I did was I wanted to make sure that if there's a problem with medical education, that they have my cell, so they can just text me. We don't need like 3 emails with CCs to everyone. If you want context, just tell me. But then I also realized that there are people I could learn from, you know, the way they looked at the world. And just in happenstance, that second time is like, is it okay if we just meet once every 6 months and everything like that? And half of them like, yeah, I'd be happy to. And so then I would meet with them every 6 months. I also they'd offer their cell number. And so if I had an issue with finance or, you know, there's some legal crisis, I'm like, hey, you got 2 minutes because I got this thing happening here, and I don't know if it's a 10, I don't know if it's a 2, I think it's a 10, but I'm happy to be talked down that it's a 5. It's probably your world too. So then I actually leaned in. So Taj, I'd see her tweets. I'm like, huh. And she's in Minnesota, so I just like, hey, want to have coffee? Jamio, we had some interactions with over the years for clinical education, but I'm like, I can learn from you. And then especially when I found out he became dean of in Aruba, right? So during COVID, our family wasn't thriving, so we took a mini sabbatical, and we just went to Aruba, and every Friday I would just meet with him, and I had done all my other clinical stuff. Rob Cooney, some of you know, met Ed. He's someone that actually searched me out, like at an SAM meeting, but I learned more from him than anyone. And then Daniel's down the road at Mayo as the head of their digital education. We kind of pontificate about AI and where we're at. But I learned more of those 4 people than any kind of journal article. And so I would tell you that if you've never heard of personal learning networks, I didn't. If you haven't thought of who you want to be, and they're usually people different from you. If I want a massage, I hang out, I'm male, pale, and stale. I hang out with people who look like me, and I talk about the Packers. But if I want to learn about something, I actually do the inverse. You know, people that maybe I really wouldn't have a beer with, but it's interesting how much I've learned from people that are different from me. And then, so this article is the most quoted article in the social sciences. And it talks about the strength of weak ties. And so the people that when I had sort of this VP job with head of all these other people, they were actually weak ties because they were not in my network. What they did was span another network, and I was able to span that. And if you haven't thought of weak ties in terms of your personal learning network, it's one thing. And ultimately, it is our world is changing from centralized to decentralized to distributed. We're probably halfway in between that. But from a systems point of view, it is a difference between a complicated system and a complex system. In a complicated system, the value of the system is the sum of the parts of the system. In a complex system, the value of the system is the sum of the value of the connections between the parts. And one of the struggles in my mind of healthcare, it is that it is a complex system, but it's run like a complicated system because it's run like the tabulating company, you know, and it's where, at least in my place, where budgets are not an infrastructure that support, it's a superstructure that drive. And sometimes it's silos. But the real value generation is the connection within the system. And so Cabrera and I did even pre-COVID. Once you're in a certain level, people talk to you and frame you based on your position, and a lot of those conversations are very transactional. It's either they want you to do something or they need resources on that. It was interesting in trying to have a shared vision of education in the Twin Cities. I actually couldn't get out of that positional and transactional thing. So we tried to be ambidextrous. So we still had deference to that system. But we just created an organization, which was on a web page, and then we had events. And so all the deans and the other professions and all that, we kind of cajoled a local liberal arts college in a place that looks like Hogwarts and said, this organization called Minnesota Futura, we're gonna meet here and talk about the future of medical education. And most people didn't know what it was, but they knew other people were coming, and so they all showed up. And we had it a couple years where we really just looked at the future of medical education. And what's interesting is whatever we talked about was a Trojan horse. It was actually getting all the people in there. That was the real one. And I don't know what has happened since then. For example, one of the things, I don't know if it's based on that, is we've stood up professional developments for program directors and for now chief residents from all the Twin Cities. So it's the sponsoring programs that our system's doing, it's the university programs, and all we really do is do a little social engineering. Let's say for the chief residents, we don't have the 2 or 3 chief residents, same program, sit next to each other. We actually have the chief resident of ENT sit next to EM and everything. And we talk about culture and transitions and management recruitment. It's all open source. We give some articles and everything. It's been interesting just to see the eyes go open, to have in-depth conversations about culture and leadership and management and these things. But it's really because we've set up, in my mind, a personal learning network amongst all the chief residents that goes pan specialty. Because leadership is actually, in my mind, leadership is what you do in your specialty outside your institution is where your leadership growth, or within your institution outside your specialty. That it's really leaning, moving away from a massage, which is in here, to really growing. So, be the pirate. So we talked a little bit about knowledge identity and just creating structures. If you create new structures, it often, you get to decide how it goes. So the whole act of convening. And so from ABEM board level, it is interesting, you know, I think we have a very binary organizational identity. We're the board or not the board. And when you're on a board, you go to these meetings and you meet the officers of the other organizations, and there's some flexing and everything, but nothing really gets done. It's a lot of flexing. If you're a convener, you get everything, and it's not based on the organization, it's actually based on the discipline. You know, how would it look if ABEN convenes all the emergency medicine organizations and just ask for feedback about highest standards, about best-in-class assessments and value certification? There'll probably be a lot deeper sort of conversations on that. Anybody know William Gibson, neuromancer? So now 70s or 80s, cyberpunk, but he wrote books where the first time mentioned cyberspace or first time mentioned the Matrix and all that. But one of his quotes, I love his quotes, is, the future's already here, you just gotta pay attention. So, who uses this on the left? Who knows what the thing on the left is? Okay, who uses it?
We don't have a subscription.
Who uses this on the right? So how is what's on the right different than what's on the left? What? Free, okay. Other than the payment. Okay, user-friendly. And how is knowledge kind of analyzed and synthesized and distributed? Right, so it's receiver-led rather than sender thing. So up to date is sort of an updated by experts on a topic. The open evidence is, you know, you ask a question, it's kind of automated on what's there. And I mean, there's limitations of both. But I would tell you this, if we're talking about our relationship with knowledge is changing, I think, and I don't have any relationship with that, as I think they're losing market share and they're increasing market share. So professional identity, what's really interesting is, so ECMO. That's very interesting. ECMO, and then who cannulates for ECMO? When I talk to these residents, it's different everywhere. And so sometimes emergency physicians, sometimes if you have major, in our spot, it's emergency physicians or cardiologists, some have CT surgeons, some have ICU thing. And so the whole issue of this skill set is based on one professional identity. Is not, it's based on the skill, right? But if all these different people, when they're different based on their professional identity, can do the cannulation, what does that mean for assessment? What does that mean for credentialing? Who's going to do the credential, if it's a micro-credential and all that? But so I think, again, things are happening already. All you got to do is look around and be perceptive. Look at how ECMO cannulation is going around this country. It is different. By the way, anybody know what the word is that starts with P that I think everyone's against you? Perceptive. Right? All right, what's this on the left? What's this on the right? Anybody heard of Rune? So it's interesting, it's sort of a startup, but it has some heavy hitters. If you start Googling rune.com or Rune, it is This is, again, sort of a little bit more specially derived community. Rune is interesting, and again, it's probably P-backed or whatever, is really looking at people that are, I don't know how to say it, if they're influencers or not, but there's communities that help answer questions for you. And again, if it's a different structure than Doximity. So if you look at knowledge, moving from up-to-date to open evidence, if you look at professional identity, is looking at the future of ECMO, and if you look at sort of structure from Doximity to Rune, I think there's a lot of learning there. So we talked about, again, the 3 hard trends. We talked about maybe things in the environment right now. What I wanted to close with is 2 skills to consider developing, and one is fusion skills, and it comes from this book, Human Plus Machine. And just to get the chase, is really looking at 5 skills. So, to be the understander, and again, knowing AI, not like AI, let's say, but knowing AI like a toaster. You don't need to be an electrical engineer to operate a toaster. You just need to make sure you don't get electrocuted and make good toast, right? It's being able to articulate. So if let's say you have AI at a bedside and you're like, hey, I'm doing this, this is being able to articulate your relationship with that. Is being able to collaborate, you know. Do you have ambient dictation here? Do you tell patients when you do your thing and say, I've based on open evidence, I do this? Okay. How do you know what you're getting from open evidence is not a hallucination? So, more to come on that. And then, being the skeptic is important. So you're on Cerner. We're on Epic, but I can tell you, on Epic, especially for sepsis, if you have someone that comes in that's tachycardic and has a temp, you get a predictive model where it says that the chance of this person having sepsis is 47%, and here's the order set that includes usually vancomycin. Do you want to do it or not do it? Well, it's fine if it's early bacterial infection, but if you're doing flu season or COVID season and you're ordering this because you have the metrics, is you need to know enough that I'm not going to do it rather than I'm going to do it. And so you need to actually be skeptic. And the advocate, you know, if you see someone that, you know, newly diagnosed pancreatic cancer and needs to come in right away for obstruction and this and that, and even if you have AI saying, you know, the mortality is going to increase, but if that person wants to go home to their dog or their cat, and that you need to be able to advocate for that, is to truly, that sometimes the information is from a patient center, is to truly be advocating. So I think this is probably going to be called differently because fusion skills be brought, but I think there'll probably be a future where there's a board that will have either a micro or a meso credential to show the floor of being able to interact, let's say, with AI in the future. If we have a certification for ultrasound, which is a technology tool, having a certification to be able to let's say work with machines, I think, is in our future. The last thing is, again, we work in a system in emergency medicine, and we work in the hospitalist system. I mean, this is a classic. From an education point of view, what's always interesting is people go from, people go from personal mastery, upper left, to team learning. It is, I'm the expert in this, I'm going to train the team, and if I just do it, what happens is you skip the mental models. You actually, most people learn in mental models, and there's a whole books on mental models and all that. Because if you don't have the appropriate mental models, you won't learn, and you won't get a shared vision. And a shared vision, a vision that's not shared is a hallucination. It's as you will not get the organization for it. But if you have all four of those, you can really work as a system. And I think if you look at the systems across the nation, we're already doing some of, it's interesting how many transfer centers started being staffed by whoever, internal medicine, primary care and everything, that ultimately now are being staffed by emergency physician. I think based on that is really having the mental models, the situational awareness. So a couple things I can talk an hour about is things to consider. One is de-skilling when we're using AI. I talked yesterday that so AI is AI until it has a name, right? AI is AI until it's called GPS, or AI is AI until you have the EKG overreads or the EKG reads. But I was in a car driving to Oklahoma, and it was hot, and all of a sudden my phone stopped. I'm like here in the middle of Oklahoma. I'm like, I used to be able to read a map or get a map or anything like that, but some of the studies, I think the first one came out with GI docs. A study where they did their colonoscopy and their findings on that, and then they had AI assisted for a couple weeks. Then they went back without AI assistance, and they felt like there's some skill degradation. And so some of this hesitancy, I think, and we'll talk about AI hesitancy, because if you look at the parallels between vaccine hesitancies and AI hesitancies, there's starting to be some things there. But it's something to think about. In general, there's this whole concept of replacement fallacy. Is AI going to take my job? And if you look at all the tech over the years, it just changes it. Does anybody know who this is on the right? Ned Ludd. Ned Ludd was in England in the early 1800s and was either a real or fictional textile worker. And that's where the textile industry changed from an individual to machines. But if you really, so they'd go around, and the followers of Ned Ludd were the Luddites. And they would go and crash technology and machines and all that. But if you really read, it wasn't the machines or the replacement. What they were worried about is the machines do less quality work, and they're going to make their life harder because of that. And if you look at sort of the AI discussions now, there's a lot of talk about de-skilling. There's some talk about the quality of it. I mean, on Weather Doximity, they're talking about, flavor of the month right now is ambient dictation and the quality of it. And so it's just something to keep in mind. I mean, the world is changing, but to keep in mind that you can have a conversations of the pros and cons of any of these changes. So I'm going to bring it home by my lived experience with the ABEM the last 8 years. And so you can kind of maybe retrofit some of it in terms of the future. Is it going to be vessels of knowledge, or is it going to be navigators of wisdom? If you look at our new certifying exam to be board certified, the particle is the vessel of knowledge, and the waveform is the navigator of wisdom. And you can see, at least on some of the things on the right, you are more waveform. You're being assessed on more waveform skills than just the particle skills. And so, and even if you look at the case here, is if all 3,000 residents every year are gonna be assessed on patient-centered communication. It is a waveform. You actually need to interact with the other to do it. It's outside in rather than inside out. And that is probably one of the things I would leave you with is the shift of a physician, or the shift of a physician for me has moved away from, I just gotta know everything about a certain topic and push it out to others, to really sensing the environment and incorporating other things. So we talked about pirates, and we talked about ships, and we talked about knowledge and professional identity and structure and fusion skills. They're probably going to be called digital competencies or something like that. I'm saying, like, I'm going to decide it may happen. But I think it'll have more people. I just want to talk a little bit about systems thinking. So that's what I got. And I'd love some questions or thoughts or comments.
To generational differences in learning and how knowledge gets transmitted or translated by different generations, and does that impact how you assess as well?
Yes, with a caveat. There's a great article called Generational Othering, the Myth of the Millennial Learner. And so we, I think as a species, for eons, have typecast generations. And it's usually one, and it's the othering part of it is usually one, I'm probably on the receiving end of you're old, you know what you're doing, you're not flexible and everything. And the flip side is that. Having said that, is that I think my kid is a nomad. I mean, he's 11 years old, and how he learns is totally this. It's like, I mean, unfortunately, all of a sudden my kid comes home and is like, I don't know how he got it. He knows the difference between a administrative and judicial warrant. And I'm like, how did you learn that? Well, I had to talk about in school and did all that. But I at least from my experience is my generation was a lot more vertical. I learned from the profs, I learned from the experts and everything. My kids' generation is more horizontal, learn from peers, I mean, that's why we have, ultimately, people are influenced most by their peers, their jury peers, peer review, all that. So I don't know if that answered, but I think we're going from vertical to horizontal.
I just want to say thank you very much for being here and sharing this with us. It's been fascinating.
I'm really lucky. My job's a lot easier than pretty much everyone in this room, and I go to a lot of these talks. This is by far the best talk I've been to in a long time, so thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Thanks again.
All right.